Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. Today's topic of the show is Engage Aging. Are you too busy? Older Adult Activity, Aging Matters LLC. And with us to talk about that is Ellen Dreiber-Hassel, the principal of Aging Matters of the Limited Liability Company, and also Jack Bishop, PhD, principal of Aging Matters of the Limited Liability Company. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us, Ed.
Well, I remember when you did a presentation at Manzano Mesa in May of 2017, and I think we've been trying to get the show on for a long time. And the show, as I told you both, centers around senior affairs, senior issues, and I can't think of a more pertinent topic than healthy aging or aging. A lot of people have questions about it. I'm 55 now. There's a lot of questions I think I wake up with every day, about aging, about a lot of things. Everybody has a shelf life. Everyone has one, but there's also things. That's why our centers and what we do in our department is so amazing to me on an everyday basis. So I'm glad you both are joining us here. And I wanted to ask, the first question is, and either one of you can take this, why is health promotion so important for people over the age of 50?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll take the first one. It's important for people over the age of 50 because everybody ages differently. And health is not guaranteed in aging. You have to engage that aging process to ensure your health. It doesn't come for free. There's work to be done. Just because you get to 50 years of age and you experience some of the changes in aging that we all experience in aging, it means you have to engage that process yourself and take responsibility for it.
Okay, Jack, it's going to prompt me to ask some questions.
Sure.
Okay, and I'm sure you mean health,
Yes.
Physical fitness, a number of different things, financial things that can cause you stress, high blood pressure. Can you expand upon your answer just a little bit? Because, it piqued my interest right away when you said you have to take responsibility. I get some of that, but I think the audience would kind of like to know exactly what do you mean by that?
Well, there are a lot of different things that happen to people when they age, and we talk about these things on a regular basis. There are cognitive changes that happen. There are physical changes that happen. There are social changes that happen in aging. There are economic issues that happen in aging. So engaged aging really is a very high-level approach to looking at the aging process and having the person become responsible for it. So they take responsibility for all the changes that happen to the level that they can take the responsibility. Some things genetic that they have absolutely no control over, they may not be able to do much about. But environmental changes that happen as we age, they can do something about those things.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we like to stress when we are working with groups of older adults is that changes with aging are inevitable. And you can either choose to engage them or choose to not engage them. But if you choose to not engage them, someone else is going to have to do it for you, and you may not like the results of the decisions that those other people are making for you. So why not do everything you can to try to understand what's coming or what has already happened to you and to be proactive about it so you're in control of your aging to the greatest degree possible, as Jack alluded to.
Okay, I get that. I do. Sometimes it comes upon you like a Mack truck just running you over.
Absolutely.
Some people age bad. You mentioned that, Jack. Genetics, sometimes you can't control. You control the controllables, and sometimes you have no control over genetic diseases or things that your parents had, and I get that. But also, I get where your approach is coming. It's inevitable. It's coming. And that's why our department. That's why the show is so pertinent, because I see it every day.
Sure.
Our center at Manzano Mesa is multi-generational, which is to me beautiful. We get the best of both worlds. But I've seen that. I've been there 7 years on and off. I was at North Valley Senior Center for a while, so I saw a lot of that too. A lot of that too. Somebody might be aging well one day, and then all of a sudden something happen and just overnight everything goes, downhill.
Well, and we don't know when that big surprise is coming around the corner. We don't know when that Mack truck is going
Right.
to hit us. So why not do everything you can from as early on as you can to be prepared for that unknown? Very similar to saving for a rainy day. We're all told to save for a rainy day because you don't know when that rainy day is coming. So why not, as preparing to age, why not eat as healthily as you can? Why not take advantage of health screenings? Why not enlarge your social network? Because you never know when you're going to have to fall back on that social network to help you out. Be
Right.
proactive is what we're trying to say. And what we try to stress in every venue we have where we are working with older adult clients.
Okay, so the message is the same for everybody then. And,
Absolutely.
And I think it should be. The next question we have, and maybe Ellen, you can answer this, what can people 50 and older do to improve the aging or their aging process? What can they do?
Well, I think you definitely have to understand that there are going to be changes with aging that you can't stop. There is going to be change in your musculoskeletal system. There are going to be cognitive changes. There are going to be changes in your social network. That's just inevitable. And many times, as these changes occur, people begin to experience grief. Who's not sorry, who's not sad when they lose a loved one? But we all know we're not all going to live to 100. So why not do what you can to expand those networks now and really broaden your horizons from every possible perspective? Prepare for the unknown. Be ready. That's really kind of the underlying message.
The unknown being health issue, financial issue.
Absolutely.
Your own funeral planning. I mean, even that's important too. Now,
It's-
some people may look at that like, "Hey, what are you talking about?"
How
but
morbid.
right, but my father bought. I remember, you're going to laugh about this, but my father, he got some money one time and bought 2 plots for my mom and him. And I got to
Right.
say that later, when they both passed away, that saved us a lot. It was already planned out. But I mean, I think that you have to plan for those things too as well. I would think.
You absolutely do have to plan for them because, again, it gets back to engaging the aging process. If you don't do it and it happens, then someone else has to do it for you, and it may not be, and it probably won't be what you would have personally chosen. Be it whether you continue to live in your own home, whether you have to go to an assisted living facility, whether you go to an adult living community, whether you're in a skilled nursing facility. The range is huge, so one really needs to educate him or herself about the variety of options that are out there.
Now, you're saying engage or, the aging process. Are you also saying, I'm sure, embrace it as well, or just engage or embrace? I mean,
Well, aren't things generally accepted a whole lot better when you can embrace it?
right.
I mean, whoever wants to do something that you know you're dreading, but you do it kind of begrudgingly.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to go a whole lot better when you can kind of wrap your arms around it and say, well, this may not be exactly how I would choose to live the rest of my life, but at least I know I'm exercising some level of control over how it's happening or how it could happen to me. Just because you make the plans doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen, but at least you have something in place to go from.
Interesting. Jack, you have anything to add to that?
I do. We look at aging as a two-way street. There's the aging of the individual, and then there's the perception of aging by the society that the individuals live in. And sometimes they don't meld. Individuals can think about their aging and, as you say, embrace it. But does society embrace the aging of all these individuals? That's one of the things we look at in our research, is the impact of society on the individual the same as the impact of the individual on society? And we would say it is not. And that's just something we have to deal with, not only in New Mexico, but in our society in the United States.
In general.
In general, yes.
That's some deep academic stuff there.
Well,
It really is, but it makes me really critically think about that.
Well, and it's
really
kind of
does.
compounded by the fact that we are living longer as a population.
Right.
Well, if we live to 100, can we all expect to go to work every day until we're 100? Probably not. So there are going to be things that we have to do in order to fill our time in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I'm already thinking about, I've got 2 years to retire with the city, but at 55, I still feel young and strong. I'm not ready to stay home and just flip channels. So,
And you shouldn't.
no, there's no way. I
And
couldn't
few
do
people
that.
are.
Yes.
So there has to be a way to meaningfully continue that contribution back to society, whether it's through volunteerism, whether it's through getting a part-time job, find a new hobby, create a new exercise program. There's got to be a way that you can find for yourself that you are actively engaged in doing something. And oh, by the way, that happens to mean actively engaged in your aging process as well.
Everybody wants to still be relevant no matter what.
Absolutely.
So, one of the next questions I wanted to ask is how does lasting behavior change occur for people over 50? And I think that's another key question. Lasting behavior change occur for people over 50? It's a good question.
There's not an all-encompassing model about behavior change. We can all, as humans, change behavior. We can formulate new habits. All of us can do that. But it's a process to do it. It doesn't happen overnight for the most part. You'd like to think you could make a change and you'd wake up the next morning and you've got a great new habit. For example, mobility changes in people as they age. And it happens to all of us, and it happens in degrees. It doesn't always happen the same way to every person. Not to any of the three of us would it happen the same way. So in mobility change, you've got to do something about that. If you're, as Ellen's saying, if you're engaged in your aging process, you have to understand that there's a potential for you to have mobility changes as you age. You have musculoskeletal issues, your gait, your flexibility, your balance, all of that changes. So you've got to modify your behavior then, Ed, to compensate for that. You have to accommodate those kind of mobility changes. And the first step in this is your awareness of the fact that these things can and do happen. And we find that not that many individuals at 50 and older are really aware of what's coming. And that's our responsibility as gerontologists, is to get the word out, to teach people what the potential changes are going to occur in your lifestyle time as you age, especially if you're going to live to age 100. There will be lots of changes. So awareness is the key. And then there are some follow-on steps to awareness that give a person the opportunity to modify that behavior with a schedule, so that in the beginning there's awareness, and at the end there's an epiphany for that individual that I've done this. I've created a new habit. It's working for me because it's helping me, for example, to have more mobility. So it can be done, but it's a process change. It's not something that will happen overnight for people.
You know, so many times we want things to occur in what I'm going to call a light switch environment. Flip it on, flip it off. And behavior change just doesn't occur that way. It takes a period of time. And for some folks who are good at behavior change, it may be as little as 6 to 8 weeks. For other folks, it may be 8 to 10 weeks. For other folks, it may go even longer. New ideas have to take root, and they have to really cement themselves in place with the individual before they realize that they need to really activate that change, and to the point where, if we're talking about adding an exercise program, for example, going to a yoga class at one of the senior centers, or going to a weightlifting class, whatever the case may be, square dancing, whatever, that you do it for so long and it becomes such a routine with you that when you don't do it, you feel guilty.
Okay, yeah.
And you
I've
get
been there,
yourself
right.
back to the class.
And that's the kind of positive change we all would like to have. The question I have is with people that are 50 or more, is the behavior change harder to occur in older people? I mean, is it harder for people to change at that? People, always say you're set in your ways, and it's hard for older people. They always say that. They're stubborn. Now, 50 you don't think is old, but you know what I mean.
I don't think it's necessarily harder. I think a large part of the lack of behavior change happens because people don't understand why it's necessary. And as social gerontologists, which is what we are, we believe and find it absolutely necessary to educate people about why things need to occur, because then they understand, then they see the value, then they see the urgency in making that change and sticking to that change, and maybe bringing a few other people along with them on that journey to the epiphany that Jack referred to get others also involved in making those necessary changes.
We want as many people in that kind of, in that kind of crowd as we can get. That's true. So, good points there. The next question I wanted to ask her: what are some of the realities of aging, and what can be done in response?
The realities of aging. One is mobility change that I talked about. That's a reality of aging. One is cognitive change. And cognitive change means that your brain function and your brain itself is changing as you get older. And we all experience some of the detriments when we get into our 50s and our 60s even, as far as our memories, as far as our executive function, which is our ability to act and react, either in a good way or in a bad way. Those things change as we age. So we have to be able to accommodate for that. And the only way we can accommodate is, like through behavior modification, you have to be aware that these changes are going to occur. Musculoskeletal. We have what they call sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass, and it happens to all of us. The problem with something like sarcopenia is it takes twice as long to get the muscle back as it does to lose it. And as we get older and our activities diminish, one of the results then is sarcopenia. We lose muscle mass. What does loss of muscle mass do to an older adult? It affects their balance, their flexibility, their center of gravity, their walking gait. All of those things can be impacted. Results of those kind of things are falls. And we try to limit falls as best we can.
Right.
So those are just a couple of them. There are social issues that happen as we age as well. Maybe we're not working anymore. Our world has shrunk. Our work world was one thing. Our retired world, and I hate to use the word retired, but I'll use it in here, the world of not working, where we may not be volunteering or doing something productive, that world shrinks the individual. And unless they're willing to engage and do something about that, it can affect their entire aging process. All of it.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Balance, strength,
Everything.
economic.
Everything.
Yeah, you mentioned so many things there. I want to keep rolling here because we got
Sure.
about 10, but this is so interesting to me. I can't help but ask some questions.
Ed, there was one thing I
Sure.
wanted to add to what Jack had mentioned, and that was changes in one's brain. And sometimes we think about brain changes and really begin to panic, but I'd like to bring up that when we're very young and learning our physical environment around us, sometimes because we haven't learned that the stove, when it's turned on, is hot. So as a child, we reach out and we pull back. But as an older adult, we don't reach out and pull back anymore because we know the stove is hot. My point here is that just because our brain functions may slow down a little bit, that's not necessarily a bad thing because it gives us time to stop and pause and think and maybe not say the rash things that we would have said when we were 20 or 25
Okay,
or
so
30.
there are some
So there's some
benefits
positives.
to, yes, I get that, and that's a good point. That's something people need to hear as well. Made me think about that. What activity barriers? What are activity barriers, and why are they important? An important consideration for people 50 and older.
Well, a barrier is something that's going to prevent you from doing something that you may do or maybe shouldn't do. So all barriers are not necessarily bad. We think about barriers on the interstate that maybe keep us from heading into a ditch. So in that case, a barrier is a good thing. But sometimes barriers prevent us from learning new skills. Sometimes people have time barriers. Sometimes people have cultural barriers. Sometimes people have familial barriers. Oh, my children would never approve of me of taking a class at a senior center. My friends would never want to see me in a gym somewhere. And so barriers, many times with older adults, become a true block to helping that older adult actually engage his or her aging. And it could be lack of time. A person says because they're not used to that activity, they don't want to rearrange their schedule to fit in new activities. So the barriers are numerous about stopping people from actually helping themselves. And that's really what we're talking about here in engaged aging, is being able to gather the tools that you see that are out there, many of which are free, many of which are low cost, and actually doing something for yourself before you get to the point where you have to go to the doctor and take another medication or end up in something that's not exactly what you would have planned to do for yourself.
Really not healthy anyway. I mean, I know we all go to the doctor, and you mentioned we want a light switch approach, that hopefully this thing will fix it right away. And if you're not taking medication and you're exercising, you're mentioning, all these things, if they all work out, in a perfect world.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure understanding a lot of what you're saying, and a follow-up to that question, and I don't know if you wanted to answer this, Jack, how can society help to minimize or eliminate activity barriers?
The first thing they can do is recognize that activity barriers exist in people. And until there's that recognition, then there's not a whole lot society is willing to do about it. So part of our jobs as gerontologists is also to educate the decision makers as well, that there's more to this than just throwing money at something. Remember I said aging is a process, it's not a condition. People have to have the ability to accomplish the activities that they want to accomplish. That's an imperative. So society can recognize that fact and have the kinds of programs that are available. And our state is quite good at programs through Aging and Long-Term Services Department, through New Mexico Senior Olympics, through Senior Affairs here for the city of Albuquerque. There are a number of programs that are out there available to people. That's how society can help. They can provide those kinds of things that will help people with this aging process. Again, it's not a condition. It's a process, and as we go through it as people, the programs that are out there for us give us the kind of activities that we need to do to counter these barriers that exist as we get older, whether they're physiological barriers or psychological barriers or whatever it is.
Interesting. I think one of the things that this city does anyway, is with the Department of Senior. I'm very proud of our Department of Senior Affairs. Because I'll ask a lot of other seniors from other states, do you have anything like this? And they don't. So Albuquerque, as far as this, what we do for seniors here in the state of New Mexico, you mentioned agency, Agent on Aging. We do a fantastic job, I think. I mean, it just amazes me that we have all these great centers and great activities. You mentioned Senior Olympics. I've seen that as well. I remember going out to a Senior Olympics one time, and there was a 97-year-old man doing the high jump. And it
Yes,
amazed me. It
absolutely.
amazed me.
Absolutely.
And it made me think, man, you know, this guy's out here. I mean, he may not have jumped very far, but he was out there at 97. So, you know, what you mentioned barriers, there's no barriers there. You know, at least for that individual.
Or at least
you know.
that individual has learned to work with his barriers.
Right.
And as we recognize our barriers and learn to work with our barriers, then we tend to see that the quality of life for each and every one of us as an older adult, as well as the quality of life for those around us, our family members, our peers, our volunteer buddies, our peers at work, in our places of worship, the quality of life improves. And isn't it always about trying to seek the best quality of life we all can find?
Absolutely. It very much is. Got about 3 questions left here, and I want to make sure we get to them before the show ends. In a state like New Mexico with a multicultural population, why are activity barriers different amongst the various cultures? And I think that's an excellent question.
Some cultures might be more restrictive on what they would allow their people to do than what other cultures would be. Some might not feel comfortable having women do certain things. Women participate in public activities. It may be any one of a number of things as far as cultural sensitivity is concerned.
I do believe that's true. Go ahead, Jack. Got just a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we get to these last 2 questions, but go
Sure.
ahead.
What I was going to say is as gerontologists, that's something that people that study aging have to be aware of, is that in a multicultural environment in this state, it's not the same patent answer every time. So the
Right.
people that are responsible for looking at this aging process are also responsible then to understand that there are differences among the cultures relative to the aging process. And we have to be aware of it and try to accommodate that when we're doing our jobs,
Right. I understand.
increasing awareness.
I understand.
Yeah.
2 more questions. How
Sure.
can people overcome their fear of getting old?
They can engage their aging process. It's all about engaged aging. The more they engage, the less they'll fear about the aging process because they're controlling it, Ed.
Right. Control the controllables. One last question, then we'll wrap it up. What do people who study aging focus on most?
On the older adult and how the older adult interacts with society and how society interacts with the older adult.
Jack, one last parting shot.
We focus a lot on activity, and we spent some time talking about the barriers. To us, activity is the long pole in the aging tent. Without the activities, controlling the aging process is going to be very difficult for a person to do. The more active they are, the better they are.
With all the things that you mentioned, you know, and I think they're all important. I'll tell you what, engaged aging, are you too busy? Older adult activity, Ellen Dreiber Hassel, Principal Aging Matters, Jack Bishop, PhD, Principal of Aging Matters, LLC. Thanks so much for being our guest. We sure appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having
Ed.
us.
Yes.
You bet. For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.